Bowser from Roth Jackson here for another edition of our TCPA compliance video series in partnership with Readymode. Today's video is going to be about spoofing. Spoofing is a word that originated in the 19th century. Apparently it came from a board game in England, and it was a game where you were supposed to trick people. So spoofing still today refers to the idea that you're going to trick someone. Don't do it. You can play the game, but definitely don't spoof with your phone numbers. So spoofing in the US comes from the Truth in Caller ID Act. The law is codified in the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. It's 227E of the TCPA. It doesn't have the same type of private lawsuits that the other sections of the TCPA that are quite popular, 227B and 227C. It doesn't have a private right of action or a right for people to sue for them, but the government, the federal government, and the state attorney generals do have the right to enforce them, and they do. And their penalty enforcement authority is quite substantial. It's $10,000 per call and up from there. So the definition of spoofing, as the etymology from the game suggests, requires you to intend to deceive, cause harm, or otherwise get something of value by conveying false or misleading caller identification. And the short story at Readymode is you just can't do it. You can only make calls via your Readymode service through phone numbers that Readymode, through its affiliated carrier, AM Communication Labs, has assigned to you. So every single call you make through your Readymode account has to come from a phone number that's assigned to you. So because it's assigned to you, it can't be false or misleading. Now, the classic example of spoofing would be someone who figures out the telephone number for the Social Security Administration, populates that phone number as their caller ID, and then starts calling people asking for personal information, Social Security numbers, just stealing personal data with the intent to get something of value that you're not entitled to. So that's a classic case of spoofing. If you manipulate your caller ID to pretend to be some other company, a hotel that isn't your hotel, or whatever else, that would be spoofing if your intent is to cause harm or otherwise extract something of value from the called party. The FCC and the state AGs absolutely enforce those cases. They have hit 9-figure cases against parties who violate the spoofing rules. So they are not dormant at all. Spoofing often gets confused with local presence, number assignments that are affiliated with the NPA and XXs or the area codes of the called party. That, absent the wrongful intent to cause harm or extract something of value, is not spoofing, particularly when those are numbers that you have acquired legitimately from a phone company. And there's also legitimate forms of spoofing. Unfortunately, domestic violence shelters, Jewish community centers, and synagogues routinely have to manipulate their caller ID so that they do not get targeted. So, a domestic violence shelter doesn't want the woman who's seeking help to have their abusive partner know that they're calling the shelter. So there's legitimate forms of caller ID manipulation, and then when you legitimately acquire a phone number to make phone calls that are local to the called party, those are also bona fide reasons for using caller ID practices like that are not spoofing, because you're not trying to improperly gain something from the called party. So that's spoofing in a nutshell. There's quote unquote legal spoofing and absolutely illegal spoofing, and the intent is the essential element. There's lots of things that you can do to manage the health of your numbers. As we all know, call blocking and labeling is reaching epidemic proportions here in the US, because terminating carriers, the carrier that's serving the called party, is allowed to use so-called reasonable analytics to block and label calls, and they'll often use crowdsourced information, dated information, and the data that surrounds a given phone number can stick with that phone number even after it's no longer used by the previous user or the previous users. So a thing you can do is register your number and keep an eye on its health through analytics tools that Readymode and other providers offer so that you keep intelligence around how that number is being perceived by called parties on the major carrier networks. So you want to see what your number is showing as when it's being answered on AT&T, T-Mo, and Verizon, among others. And Readymode offers services like that, as do others. And you absolutely want to keep an eye on the health of your numbers. And if and as they get so-called burned or flagged, there are redress mechanisms that you can and should pursue through the terminating carriers to get them to clean up and to stop mislabeling. You can rotate numbers and make sure that you have an adequate supply of numbers to make the amount of calls that you're making to consented parties or otherwise lawful calls. And if your numbers can't be answered, whether it's time of day issues, agent availability, you do want to have a clear answering system in place that identifies who you are, give consumers a chance to make an internal do not call request if that's appropriate. And it is a common practice of terminating carriers to make callbacks, automated or otherwise, to see how your calls are aligning with respect to things you say on the outbound leg of the call and how that compares with inbound callbacks. So you do want to make sure that you're attending to the health of your numbers, both on outbound legs and the inbound leg. So to recap, spoofing can be legal or illegal. At Readymode, you need to make calls from numbers that AMCOM assigns you. So you're never going to use a phone number that isn't yours, and that prophylactically prevents 227E Truth in Caller ID Act violations, and certainly never on any platform manipulate your caller ID to wrongfully extract something of value from the called party. And then separately, you want to use the tools Readymode makes available to you to track the health of your numbers and seek appropriate redress from terminating carriers when your calls are being mislabeled or inappropriately blocked. And each of the terminating carriers, by law, has to disclose contact information for you to be able to do that. And Readymode certainly can help you in that endeavor. So again, Joe Bowser from Roth Jackson, here to educate you about spoofing pitfalls and healthy number usage. Thanks for your time.